Welcome to the space where we're exploring a vision for how to live well in the things we can't help but face. I'm Jason Jensen, and I'm here with my buddy Pete. Today we're continuing on our series on AI and how to think about it, think through it, navigate it as it comes towards us. And I'm here with my buddy Pete, and I'm looking forward to today's conversations.
Me too, Jason.
The one thing from last episode that I think is valuable to kind of put out here is that we're not trying to mandate a ruling on AI.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's not our station in life.
Yeah.
As the rulers of technology that can or cannot be used. But more importantly than that is none of these things ever feel like they have that kind of certainty put into them in that kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really more important for us to continue to think through what the considerations are for what AI has, what AI is and how we use it and how it changes us. So do you have any thoughts from last time that you want to continue on? And
I really did enjoy our dialogue last time because of what you're mentioning now. And as I was saying to you just before our dialogue today, in a bit of a preamble, my hope for all of this, whether it's our work series or AI or any of the series in the future, is less to be prescriptive in the space of people's thinking and more to invite how to think, not so much about what to think. And I think that's an aspect of modern life that has caused a lot of wounding, is that people have lost the capacity to reason through a matter and allow the tension of the matter to maintain itself in the space between us and our neighbor. And that's its own art. And to not have to hurry through and to a conclusion. And most of what we get, I think, in the social media space and in the podcast space, less so in the podcast space, perhaps, is demands to think in a particular way about a subject to the exclusion of all other manners of thought about it. And I don't know that that's very helpful to people. I don't know that that is a feature in what we might think of as maturity. And so if by extension from people's encounter with what we're doing here, they could have the experience of a sense of maturing in their ability to think properly, to reason through a matter, to give it the due time that it requires, to allow it to permeate their thoughts in a way that isn't marked by hurry. I would count that as a win. And as I thought through how we engaged last time, that felt like a win to me. I felt like we inhabited the right tone for this enormous subject, and I also think we listened for our humanity in it too, and I was thankful to do that with you. So that's my hope.
yeah. One of the things from last episode for me was this idea of the Marshall McLuhan quote, where all technology is a severance from the past, or we're severing some part of the past off with the adoption of a technology.
Mm-hmm. Media extensions of man being an amputation.
Yeah, and the also the idea that we're limiting a future too, as we're we're changing a future as we inhabit and use technology. And how do we begin to discern that properly? Because what I've had to wrestle through since the last time we were together was there is some utility to AI, and there's utility to all sorts of technology. And I understand there's the law of unintended consequences that can kind of come into play. And we didn't name that specifically, but we kind of went through examples. But how do I start to begin to think through that, the dynamic of, okay, well, if I use it, when should I use it and when shouldn't I use it? Knowing that it does have this severing from the past and this limiting of a future direction in one way, that I'm casting direction. How would you begin to start thinking about that, discerning that?
Yeah. That, I think I would invite that we still come back to some of the principles that we approached in the first dialogue on this. And in our series on work, we observed the fact that all of these considerations are human considerations in the central thrust of their effects, right? They have an effect on environment and creation besides, but we don't live in relation to the environment in the same way that we live in relation to our neighbor. Our neighbor speaks back to us and interacts with us in a more vivid and dynamic way than what we might get with a fish or a tree. And there's cost there. And that in our last episode, we talked about the matter of story, and that we're storytelling creatures and story-making creatures and story-living creatures. And absent a clear and immediate answer to that question that you asked, I would just invite that we get planted there again in that awareness as a foundation for this dialogue, that my use of this thing has to be filtered through my awareness of the effects to somebody outside of me, not merely me, and the utility in my day and the efficiency that marks it and the things I want to get done, you know, but to maintain a sight of the larger picture at play. And I will be honest, you know, as I regard all of that, I'm still not sold on even the question about how and when to use this. The most I've done with it is to, I use AI the most to find references for materials that I have read and digested,
right,
and I'm trying to recall which journal article, etc. And
more as a glorified search engine.
That's right, as a glorified search engine. And I think I'm okay with that application of it. But so many besides Jason, I'm not yet sold. You know, I'm not I'm not settled on saying, well, in this case, do this. I'm not settled on saying, here's an appropriate use for a Claude agent, for example. I'm not there yet, and I am open to being informed about the ways that people can use AI responsibly and can implement it in ways that don't cost us all in the collective. But I'm still asking the question, is that possible? And I don't yet see that it is growing people in their capacities I don't yet see that it is growing them or aiding them in their characterological development. I don't yet see that the acclaimed efficiencies that are built into their day transpire into a judicious, otherwise use of their time that merits their day in some glowing and immediate sense. I haven't seen that yet. And I'm paying attention, and I relate with people who are very efficacious, and many of whom have empires that they run. And I don't see their lives made yet easier through all of this. And so
maybe if I try to summarize what you're saying is, you haven't seen somebody's life get better yet because of their use of AI in that way.
No, I have seen people become more stimulated, more occupied.
Have you seen them become more productive?
Depends on how you define productivity. I've seen people do more of the things that they wish they weren't doing in the first place, more efficiently. I haven't seen the establishment of more meaning in the work that's being done. I haven't seen growth of knowledge simply because of access to AI. We were talking about knowledge in the previous episode, and what it is and how it comes about. And I think we probably need to keep pressing on that matter. But yeah, for me, the jury's not in yet, and actually I lean heavily in, I shouldn't say that. So far, the jury is in for me. I fail to see how this is an immediate benefit to anybody if we have an understanding of the human being that we've been trying to put forward here so far in terms of what actual human goods constitute. And so hopefully we can find a lane or a path today that can serve us as neighbors and serve anybody who might be listening.
Yeah, I'm going to try and do a quick roundup of just all the thoughts that I have here, and then I actually think we should move into human goods.
Good.
But one of the thoughts that I had recently was like, if AI robots took over the World Cup, and some might say that's already happened, but non-facetiously, would I watch the World Cup if it was a bunch of robots behind the thing? And no, I wouldn't, or maybe I would, but the thing that would still gain my interest and my fascination in it would be the people behind the robots. So ultimately, why would I swap out the people on the field for the people not on the field as the source of what matters? And I think that just speaks to when you were talking about we're narrative people or story-based people, is it's not only that we're about stories, we're actually about stories involving people, persons. And that's what creates the fascination and the intrigue, is like the stories that we find ourselves in that relate to us. Those are the things that bring meaning and purpose in that way. So that World Cup example was a real, I wouldn't care. I don't just want to watch robots fighting. In fact, there are shows where you can watch robots fighting. And the interesting thing is not the robot fighting. It's the person behind how they got to that thing being their thought process and what they thought, how they were going to engineer that thing and all that kind of stuff. But so that's the one thing. The other part of this little roundup that I'm trying to do is when I can't remember if it was the dishwasher or the washing machine, when that came in, there was all sorts of widespread theory of how much that was going to make more leisure possible. And it never happened because what ended up happening was just that the standard increased of how a home should be kept in a way that actually created more work and more pressure and more things along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like as you're observing these, individuals in your life who are adopting the technology, it's not that things are getting better. It's that there is a different standard of productivity that is now being demanded of people. And the core good that we were after in the beginning has been left by the wayside as we go along. And I think saying, what is the good that we are after anyways? How do we relocate that as the aim of what we're trying to accomplish with anything might be a valuable kind of place to think through.
That's very good.
So when we start to say, okay, like if we're aiming at what a good life is, or what the good in human relationships are, where do you begin when we think about that?
I begin in honor. Honor is something that we must begin with if trust is to be a part of what we're up to. I can't trust someone who is not prepared to honor me just in my physicality, even the honoring of one another's bodies and physical space. And right off the hop there, we're talking about one of the amputations. Because the effect of so much of modern technology is to allow us a form of connection that doesn't require us to be physically present. And whether it's a Zoom call, or in the case that we're speaking to here, the incorporation of AI into more of our workflow such that people don't have to leave their homes anymore and go to a brick and mortar building where they have to suffer through and navigate the inconvenience of other people. And so we're less and less practiced in the demand of honor, the demand to honor. And so it does begin with my taking in of the sight of somebody. And we're also talking about their spiritual presence. And we didn't speak to that last time in very robust terms. But when we talk about the human being, what we're connecting to, when we do have a profound connection with somebody, is the fact that they are enspirited. That's what AI can't promise. The interactions that these young people are having with their AI agent, this kind of surrogate friend, is at best a mirror image of the inputs that they supply to it. And they're not encountering something living there that transcends even the body of the one that we're sharing the space with. So they are the only spirit in the mix. And when we talk about inspiration, last episode we were talking about inspiration in our work and what AI can't supply in that space. The locus for inspiration and the conduit for it is our spirit. Okay, this thing in us that we did not supply to ourselves, and yet in a very real sense we are, and that our life consists in. So where I want to begin with people is in honor of all of that, and to think about my human neighbor as an enspirited being. And what I owe to that, what I honor in them, what I honor in you, Jason, is your sovereignty as a self. And that's something to be conditioned against. And we've mentioned C.S. Lewis and will continue to do so, very liberally, I'm sure, because of our reading of him and his effect on so much of the thought of the West and so much of our tradition in our practice of our faith. But he wrote a book, we've mentioned it before in other series, called The Weight of Glory. And the language in the title refers to what we carry in our neighbor's potential and our responsibility in the relational space with them to honor what is potential in them but not yet enacted in them as their fulfillment, as the fulfillment of their capacities for good and to do good. And if we center the AI conversation in these human principles, I think we can have the conversation in a way that can bear some fruit. And I don't see that being done very often, We've mentioned some other authors besides. I mentioned Paul Kingsnorth last time. And what I hear from him, what I hear from John Lennox, the philosopher, on the subject. And there are people aspiring to hold this as a focus and help us remember our humanity in it all. But that is where I begin, and where I would invite that anybody begin, is in the question about what honor requires of me. What is involved in honoring my neighbor? Yeah.
And I mean, it feels like there's so much in what you just said that we should probably try and unpack a whole bunch in there. But maybe just to tie an example to honor that I feel that I'm not being honored with the advent of AI is, and this might be different for you, but the amount of email I get now that is clearly AI driven.
Yeah.
And AI written or AI first draft.
Mm-hmm.
And even as you say this, I wonder if people feel what I feel too, is like I feel insulted in some ways. When I get a sales email that is, I don't know how they got my email, and I don't know how they want to start entering into business with me. But it starts with they've clearly probably used AI to scan my website, my business website, right, and know a little bit about, and they throw it into some sort of context, and then they're offering on the bottom of that as a solution to what problems I may or may not be facing.
Yeah.
The volume of that has increased. It still seems generic, just in a more specific generic way. And it feels, did I say I felt insulted?
Yeah.
One, that they think I wouldn't notice that this is not somebody behind a keyboard, right? Like in some sense. And maybe it's just actually I feel not honored in it. That's where I'm going here. And the other one is, how does this person want to enter into a relationship, where we're doing business together? Like, is this the place where I feel like, hey, you spamming thousands of emails to get a conversion rate of probably, 1% or less. Yeah. That's what, like, in the marketing industry, like, that's good. But we've bought into that as an idea where, like, hey, it's a numbers game, so enough people will, you send it out enough times, that versus what if I built a relationship with people and I can I can build projects and work with people based on those kinds of things.
Yeah. Which of those two is fulfilling?
And meaningful, and can I trust the other person on the other side? And, and so AI has just massively flooded my inbox. I would say hundreds of % more emails that are like that. And some of them aren't even very good, like, And so, yeah, the whole idea coming back to honor is like, yeah, that's one place I feel it.
It's such a good example. It's such a good example. And, as you're describing it, and you said earlier, what if it's helping people to become more productive? This is what people understand productivity to be these days. I was able to spam the world. I was able to insert or inject my wish into their space without relationship and without the inconvenience of having to get to know them and even discern whether or not what I have on offer is something that they need. And so honor's not a part of any of that from the outset. It's not intended. And if you don't intend to honor, then you're guaranteed that it's not going to happen. And so the email situation is just one example of the kind of fruit born when a tool is not properly discerned, not only in its use, but prior to that in its making. And that has not happened with any of this. And some of what I say today will undoubtedly be repetitive. It will be brought in from the previous episode. And my kids are used to this with me. And if there's any public that end up viewing this, they'll have to suffer through that too. I can be a broken record on these things, but I think some things must be repeated in an inculcative kind of way to have them seep in. I want to read a quote from McLuhan that speaks to this a little bit, and it might even help us frame the matter further. Okay, he says our conventional response to all media, namely that it is how they are used that counts, is the numb stance of the technological idiot. For the content of a medium is like the juicy piece of meat carried by the burglar to distract the watchdog of the mind. Okay? We have so lacked in discernment about not just AI, but so much of what it is built upon in the digital space, whether it's the internet itself, or social media, as we've referred to before. Who is more connected by virtue of their engagement on social media in the human terms that we have been identifying and trying to define for people? Which of the teenagers who amply use it are themselves more human, more virtuous, more measured in their character, more connected to their neighbor by virtue of being on Instagram or TikTok? Okay? Why are they not more connected when their makers promised that they would be? Because they didn't actually have in mind human connection, because they didn't start with a definition on human being. That's the state that we're in. We're talking about technologies that were not developed with human goods in mind. And in so many of them, I would say, were not even considered. They were thrust through a rubric of corporate advancement, like so much of the modern world, in the mechanistic worldview that everybody purchased into after the Enlightenment. And this is what we have to contend with now. And so if we have to spend 20 episodes on defining humanity again to people, an audience who have ears to hear, I'm okay with that, And if we have to look soberly at a harnessing of a true telling of the story that we're living inside of, that we haven't even been settled on the previous technological implements that we routinely use, and whether or not they have aided us in becoming more fulfilled agents than we were before. And I have yet to see that proven with any of this. And it's not that it couldn't be. It's not that it's inconceivable.
Yeah, because what you're saying, as soon as it comes, it's like, oh my goodness, okay, you're a technophobe. I know that's not true, but I can imagine people going, wait, we're not even talking about AI here. We're going all the way back to, should the internet exist?
For the same reason that if, as a carpenter, you had me come in and assess your house, and you wanted a qualitative assessment of its structural integrity, I wouldn't only look at the finishing in your kitchen. I'd look at everything that went into the making of your home and the foundation it's planted on.
Right.
And that takes some time, you know. And so I'm not averse to technology.
And I'm not averse to going all the way back.
Yeah.
I'm just, as this hits people for the first consideration, if I think I'm coming to talk about AI and then we're saying, yeah, we're going to strip this to the studs to keep playing on the analogy, is that can feel overwhelming.
No doubt.
So I'm just holding that with people too, as I consider it within myself, and then go, okay, the next immediate question that kind of comes to me is, has there been no good that has happened from these things? And the example that came to mind is like, I don't have to drive to the bank anymore. Well, I kind of like that, you know, because it does mean more time spent with my family.
Mm-hmm.
But I also can imagine you saying, I don't have to interact with the bank teller anymore. And that was, you know.
And you don't have to queue up in a line. Yeah. You know, you don't have to talk to a stranger about their day or their summer plans, etc. And I'm not going to say to you that categorically one is better than the other. What I will say is that we lost something there. Okay?
And we also gained something. Yeah. Maybe that's the other place. Because I gained more time with my family than having to go deposit a check at the bank.
Sure.
Right? And I think that's a good thing. But
I don't disagree with you.
And I think it's about like, okay, how do I not just draw the conclusion technology equals bad? Maybe that's
Well, it would be foolish to simply draw that conclusion.
I'm with you, but how do we hold that so that that's not how this plays out?
What I'm trying to drive at in an answer to this question is to invite people away from the presumption that there was virtue sown into the thing that they had sold to them and that they purchased.
Mm.
And that apart from your virtue and your intention and your clarified ethic with it, it is going to cost you. I think that's a fair statement to make. And so responsible use of technology means thinking about not only the content that I get to engage with the medium, but the architecture of the medium. Okay, the foundation upon which it is built. That's what McLuhan's quote there is speaking to. And that is the beginnings of an answer about how to encounter these advancements, so-called, with a discerning mind. And maybe a challenge to people is, like, how many updates of your iPhone have you gone through in the last 5 years? Or how many new iPhones have you purchased? And for a lot of people, that's going to be many. I have no idea how many there have been in the last 5 years, but let's say it's 6. Is the average Joe or Jane taking the time to discern what it is that they just put in their hands and welcomed into their life, into the constant hearing of them inside of their world? And I don't think that people do that. And what I'm simply trying to invite is that they do. That we have a more scrupulous public about these matters, and that our scrupulosity be tethered to the intention to honor.
Mm.
And if we can do that, I think we can find very beneficial uses for technology. One that I'm sold on is, in cases of need, FaceTime. I maintain a beautiful friendship with my father, and I count myself blessed there in ways that are hard for me to even fully expound upon, because the blessing is so immense. And one of the things I cherish with him and with so many other people is the capacity to see their face, to see the mannerisms on his face, to know him as Gord. Okay? And FaceTime aids in that. It lives up to the name. Okay? Now, if he were 2 blocks away instead of across a range of mountains in an 11-hour truck trip, FaceTime might not be the best thing for me to engage as our relational space requires. It may actually be a blight on our relationship. And so the technology can be submitted into virtuous kind of purpose or not. In the case of him living 2 blocks away, were I to FaceTime him and do that only, I've forgotten the name of the philosopher who coined this sentiment, but what I would be consigning us to is constantly being in the presence of somebody's absence. And that is a net cost. Okay? And that is what I would argue it has become for so many young people, okay, who don't know how to walk up to somebody. You watch young people at dances now, high school dances, and you see like herds of cattle.
Like, yeah, help me out. I haven't been observing high school dances recently.
You see them siloed away from each other, not knowing how to engage because all they've ever done is this. Okay? And the body of that person, my other, the opposite sex, is not something I've had to routinely contend with and to bridle my attractions and my interests against the backdrop of their sovereignty. Okay? So that's what I'm talking about. And we'll kind of waft through this. We'll turn around on these things, because what I really want to induce into the consciousness of any listener is the facility to take enough care to slow down and think about, what is this costing me and what is it benefiting me? And I think the FaceTime example is a beautiful one. I'd really experience it as a loss if I had to go back merely to phone with my father. There is something precious and to be cherished about phone calls, because they were a medium where if you didn't know how to listen, it was going to be guaranteed to be clunky. There's an art to conversation, and telephone is a medium that allows for that art to be honed in a way that FaceTime doesn't, right? But I prize this technological implement and what it supplies to me, that he can get on the phone with my mom and they can see our children. That's a win, right? If they were 2 blocks away, it would be a loss. So, to discern the technology, to discern the foundations that, in terms of the intentions with which it was built, to review and to understand whether the makers of the tech had any of this in mind when they built it, or whether they just had in mind that they had a product that they could sell en masse to you. Okay? These are thoughts that I think hold value. And here we are again talking about AI and not talking about AI yet.
Sure.
But I'm okay with that.
We're getting to talk to AI. We'll have to spend, we have to start back at the internet and,
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll get back to Gutenberg or something. But.
Right. Yeah, I think in all of this, there's still a feeling that comes up in people that I've talked to that is, okay, if I don't embrace this, I'm going to get left behind. I feel like that is a story that has been sold.
No doubt.
And I even think it's being implemented in reality. I might lose my job if I'm not doing this. You know? And so
very true.
So how do I hold what you're saying in like, hey, this technology, I'm going to try to summarize here. It hasn't been built with virtue baked into it in a way that will honor what is good for the human being.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to the user to do that. And without discernment, the default is not virtue, it's going to be vice.
Very good.
Okay. So,
yeah.
And, okay, I'm with you. Maybe we need to strengthen that case a little bit more in more time, but let's assume we're there right now, and I'm sure we'll circle back to that. So then, it's also not helping in the human development that we see in things like high school dances, where they're like, whoa, I've only learned how to relate to somebody through a screen.
Mm-hmm.
And so the best parts of life aren't mitigated through screens, right? Conversations in person, you know, holding the hands of somebody you love, getting married, having children, you know, like all of those things are embodied. The best parts of life are embodied. Maybe that's my summarizing statement. And so if my human development is not a training in embodiment, then I'm missing out on the best parts of life. And so we get to that, and then I'm like, I can hold all of that and then go, man, I'm having to contend with the reality of a feeling behind if I don't embrace this. And then how do I hold the tension between those two things that are coming at me in this moment?
Yeah, I think one quick answer to that might be to never presume that simply because everybody is doing a thing that you must. I mean, that's one of the most basic principles that we teach a child on a playground, you know, and the principle holds true in adult, social, and occupational spaces nonetheless. We just presume because we have more sophisticated technology that somehow the ship has sailed and we must engage in these ways. But I don't experience that to be true in my own life.
But what about, like, you know, I think most people see it this way. Harvesting equipment. Once you move from a bull or a horse to plow your field to a combine, what you would naturally see there is that more can be harvested because more energy can be, you know, it's a superior technology that can do more work.
Yeah, that's a great analog.
And therefore, it's actually going to potentially drive the price of, let's say, wheat down because supply and demand. And if I'm in the idea, you know, if I'm in any industry, AI is going to drive the supply of ideas up. Maybe ideas, I got to think through if that's the right thing. What's the analog to the wheat? But I feel like people are like, if I can't produce more work in some sense, then it's going to be like I'm, plowing the field of my office job with a horse and a plow versus, and I see everyone saying, hey, look, there's this new thing called AI and it's like a combine harvester.
Yeah.
And that's how I think people feel like they're being left behind.
I totally agree. But you're a smart dude. I know it. And I think you're a wise man too. And what's the wheat is a question that has to be answered.
I think that is the question that's hitting me in the real time.
It's hitting
in this
everybody.
moment. Yeah.
And I think the fact that there isn't an immediate answer available tells something very true about the quandary that we're all facing here. To merely do more is not warrant for the incorporation of anything. We have to add one more article to that. Good. And that begs the question, is what I was doing already any good? Or like the example that you supplied to us with the 1,000 emails that you get now instead of the tens of them, is that what we're calling productivity? And in most of the cases of AI, it is submitted into the workspace in order for people to do more, not less. That's what I've witnessed. And I think an honest and candid look at it will tell you as much in almost every example you can think of. Okay? It's part of the impulse in people to do more prior to having discerned why. Okay? There's a dynamic in the corporate space right now where the magnates, the titans of industry, you look at I'm a psychotherapist by trade, and when I look at the characteristic personality features of the ones who rise to the top inside of the rubric of business such as it is built right now, what you see in that space is that so many of these men, and so many of them are men, are glorified gambling addicts. What's getting called advancement in business is simply the machinations of their compulsions to have bigger bets because it satisfies the dopaminergic production of neurotransmitter that gives them a surrogate sense of meaning in their day. And so they hedge a greater amount of money on the prospect of a larger market share. And they develop a technology not because it's aimed at any human good at all, but because it has the facility to occupy people's attention. And I think that marks more of large business, and large business are the producers of the technologies that we're talking about, than almost any other dynamic that we could name. Okay? And I don't want to submit myself or the interests of my family or the daily activities of my children into a grid of experiences mediated by technologies that were made by such people. Certainly not without pausing and inviting some thought and some due care about that. And so maybe it's going to take a while for us to sort through the story of modern business in that sense. Because when you listen to the claims of such men, okay, were they in my office, I would assess them as not being of sound mind. And enough has been said already about the modern corporation that, if you took it and assessed it as an individual, okay? Because it's endowed with the rights of a human person. That very quickly, if you submitted it to the HARE PCL-30, the psychopathy checklist that we run inmates through in institutions, the corporation comes out looking very psychopathic. You could assess it, and you'd be running risk assessments on it to make sure that it wasn't a threat to the life of somebody out in the community. That's the heart and the character of the modern corporation, and it's in those environments that these technologies are produced, and it's with that mind. And I'm okay to use the technology. I'm okay if such a mind developed FaceTime and I get to submit it into my purposes. But if we can invite people to think about not only the architecture of the technology, but the story that led to it, and also the values of the people who developed it in the first place. If we can connect our communities to an awareness of that, we'll be equipping them to make better decisions about what they do with it. And if we can regard our companies as communities in themselves, okay, ecosystems, neighborhoods, then we're getting to a place where we can actually properly discern this matter of AI. And so I think for a while, whichever direction we look in, one of the things that we're going to be doing is inviting people to discern the story that relates to that thing or that person. And the stories that have given rise to what we now face on the daily. Okay, most people don't put their feet on their carpet before their phone is in their hand. That is a drastic change to the human story. And people ought to ask about whether this is good for us. And so AI is no different than your phone in that sense. You know, is it serving you? Is it costing you? And do you have enough understanding of the human being in its properties and its character to be able to make wise decisions in that space? And can we reason together through a recollection, a remembering of our humanity before we say, how ought this to be used? And I think that nothing short of that would constitute a wise movement forward. Okay? And I don't hear people saying that enough. I do hear people saying it, and I cherish them when they do, and I cherish them for having said it. And at some point, we should rattle off a few resources for people in that space. But in the main, you know, you listen to, I've really appreciated Joe Rogan over the years. And he gave us the gift of witnessing his growth and development as a person. He did that in a public way. And maybe I watch or listen to him with some different interests because of my calling as a therapist and someone who works explicitly with people in the space of their living. But I've respected the way that as he became a married man and then had children, more and more of his interests transcend his wants. You can see that visibly. You go back 16 years in his podcast space, and he's smoking blunts and talking about nothing of any substance to anybody with a bunch of his comic buddies. Well, now he's a pretty erudite interviewer. I don't hear him talking about any definitions on our humanity prior to the discernment of AI and its incorporation into every aspect of our lives. What I hear him saying over and over again is that we're making a God. We're making a God. That's what people talk about. We talked about in last episode. The makers of this stuff talk in religious terms. And Ray Kurzweil was asked, is there a God? And he's the father of the singularity principle, right? And he was a Google executive, and he's an inventor and a brilliant man in the technological space. His answer was to, is there a God? He said, not yet. And I think we need to take very seriously the way that these people think about what they're doing. And if we told those stories as much as we talked about how AI is available to us, I think we'd be more equipped for a more responsible use of the thing. And so you'll hear me do that a lot. You know, I'm as interested in the people as I am in the product. And no label has ever proven a substance. And it's only the use of the thing and the intentions with which it was made that prove the substance. So I don't know what you want to do with that, but I do think it's important to invite people to think in those terms about what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to take in from
I'm
what
sorry,
you just
buddy.
said.
I know.
Maybe one of the thoughts that is coming to me is there a part of it where a lot of what an LLM is, and this is going to be oversimplified, but is a it's taking all the information that's out there. And so they've just mined information from everywhere. And even this just feels like opening more and more, you know, this world is just getting bigger.
Yeah,
but
it will.
They've taken all the information that's out there, some of it of which is not permissioned by the person who owned that intellectual property. It's just been, you know, taken, and then it becomes a mathematical equation on the reproduction of that information based on my request for it. And so outside of the ethics of, you know, how they got to all the information that they can then use a mathematical equation against, which I understand is even problematic statement in and of itself, which that puts into the place is AI stealing, you know, like is using AI stealing, you know, like that'd be a good question to ask at some point. Putting that on the, you know, next is, there is goodness out there that it's mathematically bringing back to me in a organized way, in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And so is there goodness to be found in what I'm able to then get from it? In that it's and I'm not saying it's all good, but I'm saying that there's, I am getting some sort of summary of something from good that is out there. I'm also getting a summary of what's out there brought back to me. And so can I shape the way the tool works by asking the right question? Maybe that's
there you go.
That's one of the temptations that I'm faced with, right?
Yeah. Well, I would say it's a responsibility you're faced with, not a temptation.
Okay, summarize what you think this responsibility is.
Yeah. In large measure, we've said this before too in some of the episodes that we scrapped, and maybe we can bring aspects of those into some form that can be offered to people. But if we think about, we're talking today in some way about about what human goods are. And one of the features in our humanity that gets missed because of the pace of life is that attention itself is a moral act. What I choose to look for in what I see. Am I seeing what ought to be seen in what is before me? When I look at this man who is in front of me, am I regarding him as merely a vessel for me to extract something out of for my gain? Or am I prepared to honor you as a sacred image bearer? Okay? And there's a big variance in between those two. And we could translate that a million different ways. But attention is a moral act. And in general, in life, I'm going to find what I'm looking for. Okay? And, you and I could walk down the beautiful street out here and not be in our right minds and see all kinds of things that ought not to be seen in the people passing us by, in the wares that are sold in these stores that are that populate this community here, or with virtue in our hearts and a preparedness to love our neighbor as ourselves, we could move through that space as agents of grace and as creatures that bless. And all of that is on hand and available. But the contingency in any of that, the verdict that is wrought there, is contingent on the character that I bring to that space. And AI in that sense is similar. We talked last time about bearing false witness through the use of AI. How much of what is written these days is written by a person? How much of the self is involved in the way that people take in presentations now, right? Yes, the medium is going to be conditioned by the character of its user. But we were already in trouble. Okay, you and I and the team here worked for 18 months to carefully work through the features of a meritorious worldview, okay, one that could actually serve people. And we chiseled and honed, and we spent time around a round table, letting that sink in. And these were with good people who were already yielded to good. But few people in that room had a clarified worldview in the way that was produced at the end of that effort. And there was a unity about that, and a willingness to submit to the principles that we were able to clarify in that space. And I've seen the fruit of that here. Okay? That was an 18-month effort with wise people already submitted to good. And it was rare. Okay? That is not going on in the halls of modern business in any way that is organized or connected to sources of information and tradition that could serve them. So we were already in that trouble. The West has a characterological crisis before AI showed up and before the internet showed up. And the erosion of social dynamics and the erosion of sacred instances in daily life is proof of that, I think. And so what is the cost and what is the danger inherent in giving a tool like this to a culture that has largely an eroded character, okay, that has been severed from tradition and legacy and cultural values and roots. What is the cost of that? I would say it's enormous. In the same way that I would not give my .300 Winchester to a 3-year-old while it was loaded or at all, you know. I'm all about the use of my gun. It's a very, very helpful tool that can serve immense good for my family and my community. It's also in the wrong hands a terrible, terrible thing. And so I think we need to think in those terms about the moment we're in. And maybe today I'm more concerned about discerning the moment than I am about AI. I think that's probably what's percolating in me. And I think that's a good thing to consider, you know. And I said last episode, I think, or one previous, I spend a lot of time inviting people to slow down, because you just can't think about these things in a hurry, just as in the same way that I can't love somebody in a hurry. There is a natural pace to things. And the way that AI has been developed and is being developed exceeds the natural pace of things. And so we need to think about that.
Yeah. So what is the moment that we're in? What are the defining characteristics of it?
I think we're in an apocalypse. Okay? We're in such a state of social churn right now, and people are so harried by the accessibility of all of these technologies that can become a vehicle for their will in a way that exceeds their ability to discern the virtue of, right? And we've talked before about how there's nothing new under the sun, but one of the things that's changed is the velocity on a bad idea or a bad intention. You know, we rewind the tapes 300 years, and if I wanted to assault somebody across the world, I'd have to go and meet them. And I'd have a lot of time to think between now and that eventuality in ways that might dissuade me from my ill intentions. When I finally got there, I'd have to have a human encounter with their embodied self that might condition me away from the interest in hurting them in the way that I had imagined when I was at distance from them. Now, people war at distance. Okay? Social media. Social media is about war at distance. I'm never physically present with the one that I'm casting shade on. And you see this with young people and their language. Their speech has been affected by the spaces they occupy in the digital sense. And it's not more coherent. It's not more meaningful. It's not more decisive. It's not more measured. It's the opposite of all of those things. They speak in slang terms and in contemptuous terms about people they've never met. And they regard that as normal life.
Yeah, can you give examples?
Sure. Jonathan Haidt has spoken a great deal to this. But the willingness of a 16-year-old girl to write a comment about the post of another 16-year-old girl and her appearance as though she were an object. Just as a plain example. And that in its immediacy is changed if you brought those two girls together. And they actually had to look each other in the eye and see that behind those eyes is a story and a legacy and a heritage and a humanity. it's that over and over and over again. When you're constantly in the presence of somebody's absence, you're all the more willing to regard them in a way that is inhumane. And somehow we now have this demand to take that a step further and regard the whole human scene in a commodified way. You know, what does AI serve in the moment that we're in? It serves the furtherance of the notion of people as commodities. What can we extract from one another in what we call productivity? And so neighborhood is lost with that. A sense of the sacred is lost with that. Sovereign ownership over our minds and our ideas is lost with that. We talked about Anthropic's payout last time of $1.5 billion to all of those writers. And it really doesn't matter in the end because they're just going to keep doing what they're doing. You know, they'll take whatever I put on my website and put it into the machine, and they can mimic my voice if they want. They can mimic my likeness if they want.
That's why I just keep typing "Jesus loves you" in the search bar because then it'll know.
Sure.
I'm just feeding the AI what it needs to really know.
Yeah.
You know, but
yeah. So I'm not meaning to be doom and gloom, but look, like, just join me in telling the truth about and tell me where I'm wrong. You know, tell me where it's not the case that young women, I'm raising 2 of them right now, along with a young man, where they're made more secure, where their bonds are rendered more sacred by virtue of these technologies. Haven't seen it. Now, what I have seen is my daughters honor their neighbor on these kinds of exchanges, but that's because they've been trained to do so. And they know it's never as good as being in the presence of their friend, right? So I have concern about all of that. And I think people feel that, you know. I think if they tell the truth, people are kind of whistling in the dark with all of this. I don't see, in my exchanges with people, I don't see a real confidence about this. I mean, how can you be confident about something the makers of which claim may end humanity itself? How can you be confident about that? They openly say that, like routinely. There's a real threat here. We may have to develop new technologies to combat the threat of AI taking over humanity. Whoa. Maybe we should pause. And that's really all I'm saying. I don't trust any of it.
And
I trust people who have chosen to become wise. I trust people who are humble. And I trust people in the space where I can know them. You know, that's what to trust in anybody. And so much of this story involves the demand to trust that which you can't know, which you can't verify. And so I think it's a kind of spell that's cast over society. And there may be a season in the future where AI could be, you know, judiciously disposed into virtue. But what it would require is a culture filled with virtuous people.
Yeah.
And we're not there yet.
I mean, I feel like I studied political science in university, and I realized politics was never going to solve anything. If I change the law, it's not going to change anything.
Yeah.
I have to change the heart.
Yes.
Or hearts have to change in order for like
That's
law,
a fact.
you know, and laws do influence, and I'm not, you know, like people advocating for just laws and things
Yep.
like that, like all good.
No doubt.
I just know that the heart of the issue is the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe as you're saying all of this, it's like, yeah, it feels apocalyptic. It feels like we've got a house of cards that's waiting to come down. I've even thought of like, man, I feel like all this AI stuff is a bubble, you know, like financially and societally and whatever. And it feels like it's going to pop. And then what's going to, you know, feels like it's the next big short,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and maybe I'm wrong, you know, like hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully you're wrong on some of these things. But how do I, maybe just for today,
Yeah.
for this dialogue,
Yes.
like how, if I track our whole conversation from the beginning, is as we try to get into this, it just unravels more and more and more of like, you know, it's like we're looking behind the curtain and we're seeing that everything is held together with duct tape and, you know, like, it's not, it doesn't feel solid at all.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm okay with that. Like if that's the truth, if that is true, then I want us to tell that truth. Right?
And I'm okay. And I'm looking at it with you and I'm like, yep, that looks like duct tape to me. And, you and I might be shortcutting a little bit how we got there and might have to expand that in future episodes. That's
for
fine.
Sure.
But the thing that I'm like, okay, well, how do I face that? You know, like apocalypses sound scary.
Mm-hmm.
What, how do we face that?
Yeah.
Maybe that's just, you know, like, let's try and answer that question.
Great. Can I tell you what comes immediately to mind?
Yeah.
Communally, not individually. The effect of these technologies is to separate us from our neighbor. And absent any immediate solutions in the largesse of this issue, what we do have at our immediate disposal is the ability to step out of the matrix, as it were, and knock on our neighbor's door and say, "Could we talk about this? What are your thoughts about it? Do you know the story of how this came into being? Are you contending with this?" And bring it into the space of dialogos, right? Dialogue, a bridge between us. And something is sobered up in that. If we take it out of the space merely between our ears, where more and more people are living more and more of their time, and come out into spaces and bring the subject back into sacred domains, like what we're doing right now. Okay? That all feels risky and weighty and inconvenient. But the alternatives to it are more of the mythos of Silicon Valley, that a lot of people would say, well, or a lot of people would have the impulse to the, bless you.
Thanks.
To the question you just asked, would have the impulse to go and ask AI an answer to the question. So many people in the population, as we speak to it right now, would have that as their reflex without even discerning it, and that not see that they're in an infinity loop there, an infinite regress. And so at some point you have to come away from the tool to see it at distance. And the best way to do that is to hold a view of it in community as opposed to individually, and to engage in embodied spaces like you were saying before, and say, what might it look like for a neighborhood, a collection of 6 to 10 households, to bring this matter of the heart and the mind into a shared space? And what would it look like to invite your children into that dialogue with you, and to take matters out of the unearned holding of alleged experts, the technocrat, who claims solutions to all of this through the implementation of their technologies into your life and into your body increasingly, wearables, etc. The Internet of Things and the Internet of People is what they're claiming. Read their liner notes and you'll find that there, right? To sever that and to come back to the human forms that have always served us because they are aspects of our nature. C.S. Lewis said the last aspect of nature to be tampered with and demolished would be human nature. And that's the epoch that we're in. So how do you remedy that? You exercise your human nature by engaging your neighbor in the art of dialogue. You sit down for a cup of coffee. You have natural elements at your disposal. Like we talked about last time, you have them to your home. They're greeted by your little girl who offers them biltong at the door. And all of a sudden, you're already in a different story, and you are being remembered. It's both recollective and it's reassembly of all these parts of you that have been torn asunder and are immediately gathered by the presence of the one near you, nigh you, your neighbor, your neighbour, right? I think that's a way to hold this. And it's honest. And you get it into these spaces and you come across the awareness that is shared instead of held individually. I don't yet have answers to this. Well, at least we're telling the truth. And we're embodying that truth through this shared confession. And what follows on the coattails of confessions like that is typically prayer. Lord, help us is the next step. Like, I haven't found a solution in me. We haven't found a solution together. Maybe we ought to ask a being that might be able to impute into us a wisdom that is beyond our ken in the moment. Eh?
Yeah, you know what's fascinating about that in AI is AI is always willing to give you an answer.
That's right.
It will never say,
that's right.
I don't know.
And I've shared this with you before about certain ministers in the Christian space that have fallen from grace, as is said sometimes, and the ones I have in mind presently are men, and the ones who fall the hardest are the ones who always had an answer, who you never heard, or from whom you never heard the answer, the rejoinder to your question. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm uncertain. I'm holding this with unknowing and a sense of concern. And I won't name them, you know. But that is something to watch out for. And it's not only AI that always has an answer. It is also their makers. They are quick to promise that this is a road to the elimination of all human ills, but have yet to ever prove how it provides any of that in the now. And it's always this credit scenario where you make your claims today and you deliver in some unknown ethereal future. And every one of their promises takes that form. And on those grounds, I wouldn't trust anybody who sold anything to me that way. The good will come to you tomorrow, in the tomorrow that never comes. I'm not buying your product. Tell me, prove to me how it serves human goods now, and that you have an understanding of as much. And then we have some trust. Okay? That has yet to happen. And so why would I apply or endow this technology or these people with the notion that they have in them what they don't? They constantly prove to me the opposite. Okay? They constantly prove what they're willing to do and put in front of my children so that they can, I don't know, have a larger yacht, beat their competitor. Like, you don't find that their ambitions are much more profound than that. And on those grounds, I am inclined not to trust them. Okay? I do hope the best for them. I do mean that. I think of the incredible left brain capacities of an Elon Musk or a Sam Altman. I know less about him. And here I am making claims about people that I have not met. But if you're going to dare to develop something that you claim ought to be universally accepted into the homes of all people, then I have a right to respond to you. And those people I will the good of. I wish for their own transformation. I hope and I pray that their brilliant capacities could be submitted into some goods, but they haven't proven that to me in any reliable way. And I'm not willing to tell any other story than that until they prove otherwise. And I don't think anybody else should. And I ought to be held to the same standard, and so should you, and so should our children. And we prove what we are to each other in the relational dynamics that we talked about before, in a full circle way. How do you hold all of this? Hold it communally. We keep truer measurements in neighborhoods. We make better products in neighborhoods. We render more robust hopes in neighborhoods.
That's a lot.
That's a lot, buddy.
If it's okay with you, I think we kind of land it there for today and just kind of take that in.
And with the prayer that today isn't a wet blanket to people, with the prayer that there can be something that serves them in the things that we have attempted to think carefully through. And for my part, with an apology, if they can't find anything of use in it. But I hope that they can. And to anybody listening, I am truly thankful that they would spend such time with us, and I'm thankful to you that you'd spend time with me as my neighbor. And if the only thing that occurred today was people witnessing two men honestly and honorably attempt to engage each other, the world's not made worse by that. So I'm thankful for your presence here with me.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah.
And if they found any of that not good, there's no way they made it to this part.
That's right. That's right. So I'll issue the prayers at the beginning next time.
Next time.
Yeah.
No, it is good to be together.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And there's a lot to think through. I think that's why I think it's also okay just to sit with these kinds of things.
Yes.
If we make the claim that we're going to do this in an unhurried way, I think we have to practice it at the same time.
I agree, my friend.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll call it a day. Thank you. Cut.